This is BBC London, 94.9.
Well, one man who has recollections of George from the other side of the fence, so to speak, is broadcaster Don Durbridge. He was in charge of PR at Fulham in the 70s during George's time at Craven Cottage, and I'm pleased to say Don can join us on the line now. Good evening to you, Don.
Hi.
Now, we heard there from Clive Walker about what it was like to play alongside George, but what was he like to deal with from a public relations point of view back then, Don?
Well, first of all, let me say I find it very difficult to top what I heard of Clive's sentiments there, because the guy is a tremendous human being. As regards public relations, you have to remember that in the 1970s, and this was in the days when he went to Fulham after his split with Manchester United, public relations as far as football was concerned was still a very rudimentary art. You know, it was before the websites and before the internet and all the rest of it. It was all done on a very ad hoc basis. But, I mean, I can give you sort of a snapshot of the 18 months or 2 years or so that he spent in that Fulham team. He was lured there by a lovely, lovely man called Alex Stock, who was the manager of Fulham. Alan Mullery was in the side, Bobby Moore was in the team, and Rodney Marsh was in the team. So although they were in the old second division, it was very much a star-studded team. But nevertheless, when he played his first game, Fulham's average gates at that time were 9,000, and his first game, if I remember rightly, was against Hereford United, and their gate was 29,000.
Yeah, that's more like it.
And that was the pulling power of the man. I mean, he was the first football pop idol. There'd been greats before him. I mean, I saw Stanley Matthews and Tom Finney and Tommy Lawton and, you know, players like that. But along came this guy just at the right time. You know, the swinging 60s had taken off. He was often known as the fifth Beatle. He had it all. I mean, he had the looks, he had the gorgeous blue eyes, he was attractive to the girls, but most of all, of course, was the football talent. So he was a kind of a born, ready-made, take-him-off-the-shelf superstar.
And as you said, it was an unusual time in that Fulham were in the old second division then, but they'd managed to attract these stars like Best, Rodney Marsh and Bobby Moore. So it must have been quite unusual days to be involved with the club at that time.
Well, they were, because the great thing about all those four guys was that in spite of their sort of superstardom, they were all such down-to-earth fellas. And I know that might dispel a few illusions because we expect our icons to be up there on pedestals and things, but the reality is very often different from the imagery. And the reality was that they were down-to-earth blokes who wanted to mix and mingle, and Fulham was a happy family club, and watching Fulham in those days, it was a fun team. They went to play football to enjoy themselves.
Don, this is the days before the tabloid press got quite so interested in people's private lives. Did you find yourself having to cover up for George, Rodney, even Bobby Moore?
No, well, certainly not George or Rodney, and as you rightly say, the tabloid press wasn't as intrusive by any means in those days as it is now. I did have to cover up for Bobby Moore on one occasion, but that's another story. That was to do with, of all things, a drink driving charge, and Bobby wasn't what you'd call a heavy drinker. He just got unlucky one day. That's another story.
You couldn't do it nowadays, I guess.
I guess not, no. Although, I mean, these days, players have agents and handlers and all sorts of people, you know, the Max Cliffords of this world and so on. So who knows what's covered up?
No, I don't think they're any match for the tabloid press, with whom, of course, I admire so greatly. The other thing is, what's your abiding memory of George Best then, please, Don?
Well, there are several. I mean, obviously, on the field, the man was magic, and I listened with great care to everything that Clive was saying, and I saw him sweat in training as well. But the great secret of George Best as a player was his balance. And it's the thing that people forget. He was a very slightly built guy. He wasn't a tall, robust, beefy fella. He was very slightly built, and his genius depended on his talent. That was on the field. Off the field, I remember a kids' Christmas party at Fulham where the players and the staff, you know, the trainers and physios and management and everything, were each paired up with a child to play games in the evening. And people said, oh, George won't turn up, but George did turn up. And he was drawn with my daughter, who was then about 10 or 11. and she was absolutely distraught because she wanted to be with Viv Busby, the centre forward, who was her pin-up.
Ah, the mighty Viv Busby.
She got lumbered with George Best.
Poor girl.
Do you know the guy was the absolute epitome of charm? They played table tennis, they played shove halfpenny, they danced, they did this, they did that, they did the other thing. And a more courteous and genuinely friendly person, it's impossible to imagine. And a tear comes to my eye just to remember that occasion.
Don, thank you very much. That's a very personal reminiscence. We're very grateful for you giving us here on BBC London 94.9. I should make the point once again to people who are ringing in. George Best hasn't died, but his doctors say that he is beyond medical help now. So we're just trying to celebrate the guy's life, not, as I say, don't want to get too mawkish about it. If you've got some stories about George Best...